Yes, so very good evening from me. My name's Prajnamanas, and I'll kick off this series that we're doing on the Noble Eightfold Path. So, although all the evenings in our series stand alone and just come to whatever you can, there is a thread that runs through them. So this is the first of 8 weeks on this really, I was going to say key teaching, but that actually sounds a bit patronising towards the teaching. It's a bit more than key. It's fundamental, ancient, transformative even teaching of the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. So almost, if you've heard of Buddhism, you've heard of the Eightfold Path. It's one notch down. Almost everyone's heard of Buddhism, but most people have heard of Buddhism have heard of the Eightfold Path. So we'll be going into that and what it means. And I'll say a little bit about that generally, but mainly just look at the first limb, as it's called, which Amal Yoden mentioned is called perfect vision. And then the other order members in the following weeks will unfold the rest of the topic, the remaining limbs. That's if you don't do the intro course, which I also recommend. So after this evening you can make your choice, let's say. Small shrine for the intro course or keep going with the Eightfold Path. Before doing all of that, I'm just going to briefly tell you about a dream I had on Saturday morning, and hopefully remember to come back to it at the end of the talk. I've been known to forget. Anyway, in the dream, I was in a study which had desks on two sides. I was moving all of my files and papers. Don't worry, it's not a long dream. I know what it's like when someone launches in. Anyway, I was moving all of my files and papers from the shelves on one side of the room to the other. Okay, so I was doing a big kind of heave-ho of all of my papers and throwing a lot of them out. One of those nice, joyous sort of dumping the detritus things, sorting them all out. And out of the papers at one point fell a huge heap of first-class stamps. They were golden and very large and glowing and very beautiful. And they were familiar. I remembered that they did belong to me. I'd forgotten all about them, but there they were, lots of first-class stamps. I even have heard from time to time that stamps are legal tender. I haven't Googled this, but apparently you can exchange them for goods sometimes. Anyone know about that? Anyway, they hold their value, you see, because it says first on it, like first class, and that's now worth more than a quid. I think when I was little it was 60p, but I think it's, anyway, £1 something. Anyway, I realised when I was holding this heap of stamps, this is really valuable. This is actually quite a lot. There were dozens and dozens of those books of stamps that you get. I thought, this is really valuable. I'm holding here a kind of treasure that belongs to me. It was in my stuff, in a load of bits of notepaper that I don't need anymore. And it fell into my hands, and I felt really, really happy. Okay? So that's the dream. Let me come back to that later. Okay, now for something a bit different. A kind of introduction to the Eightfold Path. I won't spend long on this because you may have come across it, but the Eightfold Path is basically the way things are and how to get there. Okay, so it's the wisdom of the Buddha's mind and a kind of map for how to tread our way towards it. So while it starts with the limb, they're called limb, the Noble Eightfold Path, the traditional term is Arya Ashtanga Marga, and anga means limb. So rather than fold or step, it's more like a thing with 8 different spokes even, or limbs. And the first one being perfect vision is basically knowledge of things as they really are, reality itself, and knowing that completely and intuitively without any concepts in between us and it, a full kind of realization. So in its utmost expression, it's basically the mind of the Buddha. Okay? So a mind that cannot now fall back from a spontaneous response of wisdom and compassion for all sentient life, simply a wish to alleviate suffering, no possibility now of ill will, greed, grasping after things that won't satisfy any of that. Okay, so perfect vision is that first limb, and the second to 8th are perfect emotion, speech, action, livelihood, effort, awareness, and meditation. So easy. Just do those. But you can split it also, these 8 limbs, into just 2 sections, which our teacher Sangharakshita has called the path of vision and the path of transformation. I'll come back to that a few times. I should say, by the way, that I'm basing this, and we'll probably base all these talks, at least loosely, on our teacher Sangharakshita's exposition of the Eightfold Path in his book that's called The Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. But it used to be called Vision and Transformation, that book, which I thought was rather a better title personally, because it suggests that in this first stage you've got, on our level at least, a glimpse of things as they are or as they might be. So a flavour of that mind of the Buddha. So the first limb is the path of vision, if you see what I mean. All of the rest is called the path of transformation. So transforming our emotions, speech, action, livelihood, etc. are all ways of allowing that vision to permeate all of the aspects of our life and basically become expressed. So you could say that perfect vision in its purest form is not something personal or within space and time. It doesn't look particular. It's beyond all thought, all concept, actually beyond description. Okay, but something like perfect speech, that's quite a lot more day to day, isn't it? And actually, just to take it down another notch, as it were, Sangharakshita uses this language of perfect, but quite a lot of the Buddhist tradition just uses the language right. So right speech, meaning basically skillful speech that, promotes harmony, speech that's kind, speech that's true, all of that. That's a concrete expression of something, isn't it? So you've got perfect vision, a kind of universal value, and then you've got its working out in things like speech, livelihood, how we earn our livelihood. So is that skillful? Does it support? Is it in line with the teachings, or does it go against them in some way? Does it conduce to positive mental states, or does it actually make us more sort of tight and graspy and a bit greedy? So we can transform our livelihood, how we support ourselves, what we kind of contribute to the world. Meditation, well, that's something we do. I don't know if you do it every day, but it's a day-to-day thing, isn't it, meditation? You can transform your meditation and all these other limbs in accordance with that perfect vision. So, as well as a kind of sequence, so after you have the perfect vision, there's one way of seeing this where emotions are then refined and raised up, more kind of, more positive, eventually more beautiful, and so on. Transforming the speech, livelihood, and so on, and arriving at meditation, basically transforming the mind itself. You can see those as a sequence. But it's probably also simultaneous, because that perfect vision, as it kind of descends down into these different aspects of our being, or as we let it with our practice, that's probably all happening at the same time, or irregularly, in kind of lumps and bumps here and there, and you hope that all those areas are kind of covered eventually. And I would say that sincerely practicing Buddhists will arrive at all of those areas by and by. So if, for example, you meditate regularly and really, make decent efforts to cultivate mindfulness and metta, and crucially, keep going with that over the months and even the years, eventually, for example, you probably, of your own accord, but probably with support from others doing the same, you'll start thinking about your speech and think, I don't know, what all that kind of casual cursing I do, it doesn't actually feel that good, or I sometimes bend the truth for my own advantage. You wouldn't necessarily call it a lie, but I'm sort of, I think it's a great phrase, bending it, not speaking really straight. Livelihood, that's very common for people coming along to the Buddhist Centre, I think, sooner or later to think, not just how do I earn my money, but what do I pour my energy into? Do I really want to do that? Is it giving something? Doesn't mean people have to change what they're doing, It certainly happened for me. I was doing something I don't think was exactly harmful. I was kind of doing editing and translation work, and I actually found myself telling a lie one day on an email. They used to do this sort of funny competitive thing. An editor with a piece of work to offer would email 5 or 6 people at once and say, who wants this piece of work for $100 by 10 days' time or something? And you basically had to be the first to reply. And you got it. I don't know, terrible atmosphere around that kind of thing, I thought. Anyway, I had this thing, I found myself writing back one day. You know, I was self-employed, so I was writing not just kind of yes please, or, you know, sort of, you know, kind of dashed out the words and hit send as quick as I could, because I thought I probably am the first to reply. I probably happened to be sitting at my computer. And it was a piece of work, I don't know, I wasn't particularly interested in it. I don't think it was going to, I guess it was providing a service, but it wasn't going to light up anybody's world. I was probably translating a short newspaper article from Spanish into English. And I wrote, not just yes please or I'm available, I wrote, I'd be thrilled to do this. And I was living upstairs in the community, and, you know, Buddhism was applying its gentle, positive pressures on my mind. And I thought, that is not true. That's not true. You know, in a way, I'm actually feeling kind of critical of this process and a bit irritated with this editor for working in that way. But I'm really ready to compete, and I've got my little phrase that's kind of got maybe a bit of an edge. Other people might write back saying I'm available. I'm going to write back saying I'll be thrilled to do this. You know, and I thought, it's not true. So, you know, the positive pressure of sort of gradually building awareness affected me. And I thought, I don't want to be doing stuff like that anymore, actually. And funnily enough, it helped me withdraw my criticism, which is another story. But I was a bit moany about the industry I was in. Do you know that feeling? You're kind of in it and you kind of need it, and I don't know, they're scratching your back, you're scratching theirs, and it kind of works. But I was a bit, I kind of used to carp about it a bit. I don't know, a lot of the time I wasn't enjoying myself, but like I say, I had the energy when you needed to kind of compete for a bit of work or get it done quickly, and I suppose I probably tried to do it quicker than others so that they'd ask me next time and all that. And I just thought, I don't want to be doing this anymore. And then I started, it's one of those moments you remember, I suppose, I started kind of forgiving people more, and thinking, oh, I'll be more positive. If I withdraw myself from the situation and do something else, which I ended up doing, I'll get out of that kind of mental state as importantly as anything else. So there's just a little example of how if we've caught a glimpse of what the mind might be like, it will start to touch these other areas. So in a nutshell of a nutshell, that's kind of the Eightfold Path. I don't know if that's even fair, but it's a nutshell anyway. You get a glimpse of how the mind might be, and it starts to just affect you, and you start to unfold in these different directions. Okay, so to talk about vision itself, it's probably basically a spiritual experience of some sort, for want of better language, or an initial insight, let's say. So it's a glimpse of how things are. That arises for people in lots of different ways. Some people might get more reality rushing into their mind through something like a bereavement. I remember Subhuti, one of our teachers, saying, and I thought this is a brave thing to admit actually, that when his mother died, there was obviously intense grief, he said, and a kind of opening up somewhere in his mind, a kind of spacious experience that he had not had before, and a bit of, I don't know, these are my words now, I'm remembering what he said, but a bit of kind of pure oxygen somewhere in the sky around it. So a very painful experience, but something a tiny bit freeing in experiencing that and knowing that that does happen. And I imagine that that's to do with the fact that death being part of reality, of course, often a very, very painful part of it, it can actually put us slightly more in touch with things, as well as also causing grief and pain and so It could be that a glimpse of vision comes through a really transporting experience of art, or indeed nature. So I hope enough of us are getting out into the natural world often enough for this to happen these days. I sometimes worry. But if you're really absorbed in a landscape, or people who do a lot of walking find this, a lot of walking on their own, you get into a rhythm, you get in tune with the landscape around you, and a new mental state starts to arise. And it's got in it, not necessarily a concept or a load of words, but some sort of sense, some greater sense of our place in the world, or our connection with it, or the fact that there's not us and it. There's something else going on. You know, I suppose, I mean, this often ends up a bit corny, doesn't it? Or that's my fear. But when people talk about communing with nature, which of course actually is a very good experience, I think this is the kind of thing they mean. You mean you feel a little bit more one with it. It's as though that's happening. So a glimpse of vision could come that way. It could come in a strong meditation experience. Or actually, Sangharakshita says that it could also come from our ordinary human maturity ripening further. So he says if someone's leading a healthy life and reflecting a bit, and the years go on, as they get older, and basically observe what's happening around them, not get into any very strong negativity, bit by bit, a glimpse of this vision of how things really are might start to arise on the basis of that. So he calls it our simple human maturity. Okay, so it could come via that as well. Lastly, he says it could come from deep or prolonged thought. Can't say I've had that one myself. He says you can actually think your way directly into how things are. I don't think he'd recommend trying that one mainly for most people most of the time. A lot of us, I think, we're probably not equipped to think that well for very long. Very difficult thing to do, I think. A lot of us probably need to round out the emotional positivity before we direct our mind towards how things are, but he says it can be done. Yeah, so perhaps one more thing about this, and then I'll ask you to tell me something. What he's calling perfect vision, the tradition sometimes simply calls right understanding. Amazing to me how much more attractive it is to call it perfect vision than right understanding. One of the issues with right, he says, is that what's the opposite of right? Wrong. That's the pairing, isn't it? Right understanding, wrong understanding. It's a bit, you're in one or you're in the other. And understanding, can anyone think of an issue with that as compared with vision? So calling it understanding instead of vision? What might be a problem there?
Like mental.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds mental. It's basically largely a cognitive term. Understanding in its real depths probably isn't, but it mainly sounds like that to us. You know, do you understand this idea? Do I understand the instructions? All of that. Okay. So he's calling it perfect vision, partly because drishti, the Sanskrit word he's translating as vision, is based on a word for to see, and that's why he's calling it vision. So another reason understanding is a bit of an unfortunate translation. He's saying it's to do with seeing how things are, because vision, you know, when you walk into a room and see something, you don't need to think about it to see it. You just see it. When you see your friend coming around the corner, the perception arrives all at once. There is Machu Kumara, or there is Kusasara, or whatever. It just comes like that, intuitive. And he's saying perfect vision is much more akin to that, where it's intuitive, immediate, it's knowledge of something rather than a conceptual working out. Okay. So I just thought I'd kind of map that in case you've come across these terms, right understanding, right emotion, which also to me sounds weird now, right emotion. Anyway, right speech, etc. He's saying perfect vision. But I thought I'd just get you to see if you've had glimpses of this yourself. So like I'm saying, at its uttermost level, it's the mind of the Buddha. But we've all probably because we're here, I'm wagering, had a glimpse of perfect vision, or a glimpse of a glimpse. And so, just to say them again, that could be a kind of spontaneous, mystical or meditative experience. It could come about through kind of personal tragedy, transporting experience of painting or music or literature maybe, meditation, deep or prolonged thought, or an experience of your whole life ripening through your simple human maturity. Okay? So you could just get thinking, it doesn't matter what it is or how small it might sound to you, just see if that's familiar to you. If you've got something in your life that you could equate to that, where your mind is a bit lifted, your sense of things and how things really are gets a little bit more attuned, even if you couldn't articulate that at the time. That's not important yet. And get into pairs with someone ideally you haven't met, and exchange your glimpses of vision. And if you're online watching, do type them into the box and Becky can tell me what some of them are later. Okay. So just take, we'll have about 4 minutes to do that, so a couple of minutes each. Okay. Over if you haven't already, so if you haven't spoken yet, do go ahead. Okay. Lots to say, obviously. Hope we've all been able to think of something. Quite good to conjure a sense of it, I think, and see what you get from your life when you drop in this reflection. Let me just see if there's anyone online who's contributed first, actually. Not yet? All right. They've got a lag, haven't they, famously? They're 90 seconds in the future or past or whatever it is. Anyway. So, who's willing to say what came to mind in the room? Alex?
I thought of seeing my grandfather's corpse in the funeral parlour just before his funeral in the church.
Okay.
And he's like, what had been a very kind of big, strong agricultural man was then kind of dead and grey and a different colour. And just this feeling of, oh, that's how it works.
Okay. Okay, so seeing your grandfather's body somewhat changed and getting a sense of...
Oh, just that's what's going to happen. Like, Granny's going to die,
That's
Mum
what's...
and Dad are going to die, I'm
Okay.
going to die, the dog's going to die.
Okay.
Everyone I meet, everybody has it. Like, that's the sort of thing, that's what's actually going on here, and we've just sort of been like pretending it's not.
Right, yeah, okay. So the sight of the body causing the thought, this is part of, well, this is what's really going on, you were saying, and it's universal, it's going to come to everybody, and on some level we're pretending it's not. Yeah, I think that's a very good example. Thank you. Teddy.
So I had this experience when I came back from deployment. I used to be in the US military.
Right.
And for almost 9 months, all I saw was like brown and beige and sand. That's the only color that I saw.
Okay, yeah.
And then we flew over a base in northern Italy called Aviano in the Alps. And I remember when I was waiting in the airport, I was looking out into the white mountains and the trees, treetops. And I sat there for 3 hours, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing I ever seen in my life.
Wow.
It's like the most brilliant white and the most lush green.
Wow.
And for that time of 3 hours, I just lost sense of the time completely, and someone had to come get me.
Okay.
And I'm like, you were sitting here the whole time? I was like, yeah. And I just think like we just get so inundated with stimulus.
Yeah.
Right, but when it's actually taken away from us for a while, and we can come back to how beautiful the world really is when we're not overstimulated.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for telling that story, Teddy. Yeah. So gazing at the snowy mountain peaks after months of desert sand and only browns. Yeah. And you said how beautiful the world really is. If only we weren't so distracted. Yeah. That's very good. Yeah. I notice actually, I mean, I know we've only had 2 examples so far, but impermanence or death and beauty often seem to characterise these experiences. That might, perhaps you've got other qualities in yours, but I notice both of those in moments I've had as well. Yeah. Okay, one from home. Yeah.
So somebody online, I don't know their name, says the feeling of, say, when you're out walking and just a flower or tree branches against the sky and it just transfixes you. Or possibly even more simply, like when you do something kind and that warm feeling of doing something right.
Okay. Well, thank you, whoever you are. So being transfixed by the sight of branches against the sky, I think that was. And also a kind act, yeah. So the second one's to do with human potential, isn't it? And the first one is a sort of broader one about living in the world, I think. Yeah. And all of these, I think, can have the quality of lifting the heart. Some of these things might be heartbreaking as well. It's a funny combination of things, or a whole bag of qualities or types of experience that this might be. But yeah, I think so far all the things we're hearing would be glimpses of vision. Yeah. Let's have one more. Alice, yeah. Maybe let's do the Phoebe's first, and then come to your question. Is that all right?
I don't know if this is I don't know what it is, but it just came to me. I often travel through Paddington twice a week, like Paddington Station.
Okay.
And for some reason, there's like this one like path, like one platform, and it always seems to be that moment that I just kind of like lift, and it's like this feeling of being so tiny and meaningless, and yet so important and part of it all. So it's like both of those are happening, and then all the other passengers and people on the platform and anyone passing feels like so known to me almost. Yeah, but I don't know if that is perfect vision, but it feels like, yeah, very powerful, but not my power, but like there is power.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. And you get that twice a week. Amazing. Yeah, great. Yeah. So that sounded like both the enormity and the smallness of humanity, something in there at least, something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I think well, I was going to say scale, but it's more like perspective seems to be part of this as well, doesn't it? The Buddhist vision actually has got emphases in it of both. Sometimes it's saying, Padmasambhava has this saying, my vision is like the sky and my actions fine like flour. I think he says my vision is broad like the sky and my actions fine like flour, like finely milled flour. What he means there is my perspective is limitless. The attention I pay to how I act and how I speak, how I treat another human being is finely grained like milled flour. Yeah, that's what you've reminded me of anyway. Yeah. Okay, let's do Alice's question and then I'll speed us along.
We were just talking and I was kind of wondering, like with these perfect vision and like the different kind of understandings, would you say that it kind of tends to be about like reality and kind of existence more? Because when I was thinking, I could think of quite a few times when I noticed something in myself, kind of like, oh, this is how I view things, for example, or like this is a conditioning that I'm used to. Is that kind of related, or is that something separate? Because I guess that kind of affects your own reality.
So I understood the first part of your question, and I think it's important. In fact, it's what I'm going to come on to now. So you were saying, is it to do with existence, or is it to do with me? Is that what you're asking? These moments?
Well, yeah, like I can kind of see like, yeah, like can it also be about me, like, oh, I'm noticing that I always, like, this is my conditioning and I do this, or is that less to it?
Okay, so is it to do with noticing our own personal conditioning, or is it more? I think it's probably somewhat more than that, because I think that these moments have the quality of going beyond the personal. But it could start with that, and it could be based on that, I think. So I think down at its most day-to-day level, a glimpse of vision is basically a glimpse of a mind that could grow and grow. So whether or not that's in what you've said, if we notice our own habit, say, I was asking a friend actually at the weekend, what did he think vision was? He said he realised when he first started meditating that he created his own anxiety, and that then opened up some sort of slightly transporting experience. I think a moment of vision probably has got some sort of power to it, perhaps even a power of its own, but it could be triggered by something like that. So he was saying this was a moment of vision for him because we'd call that teaching that he was kind of stumbling on, that the mind creates the world. That's a kind of really abbreviated form of a Buddhist teaching, that mind creates world, that he stumbled on by meditating. He didn't get told that, he just meditated and realised that it was his own mental habit creating a lot of proliferation that made him feel anxious, which he then obviously found a painful experience. It causes us to tighten up more, probably cramps up our speech and action and thought quite a bit, and in general the outcomes are kind of less good. So I think it could do, yeah. that's my translation of what you've asked, if you like, is a moment like that. Because you've got it in seed form there, you've got something like the mind of the Buddha. Amelie Oden was saying in the first half, wasn't he, that one of the Buddha's major discoveries is that all things arise in dependence on conditions. So I imagine that that's what your story or your question is getting at, that we sometimes see with a bit more insight that the world we experience, what we think of as the world, is actually our mind, and very often its own reactions to things, what we particularly habitually pick up. I don't know, things we sort of dislike, therefore we see them more, things we react to in others, which we'll attribute to them, but really that's a pattern we've got. If you extend that all the way up, you're touching on something like conditionality and seeing that it's actually on the basis of this particular habit that I experience the whole world in this certain sort of way. So I think it is, yeah. So I was going to come on to say that here are these glimpses that you can't necessarily articulate at the time. Yes, I was just wondering whether to tell more examples. Anyway, yeah, I will. I was just thinking, will it sound a bit too grim? Anyway, although it's a kind of more of a heartbreaking one. Anyway, I was once looking at Mark Rothko's paintings in the Rothko room. Very kind of controlled environment. You may know it. It's the lights are kept dimmed and the temperature of the room is kept very cool so that the paintings don't degrade. He wanted a whole room dedicated to just these paintings to be an immersive experience. He flew into a rage when he learned that they were to be used for the exclusive end of a restaurant only. Anyway, I was sitting among these paintings after a solitary retreat that I'd done, looking at them, and the friend I was with, I was very, very affected by them immediately as I walked in. I haven't been able to repeat this experience, by the way. I've been back many times. It's never happened again, of course. Doesn't seem to work like that. Partly these things are accidents. That's until our practice has really got loads of momentum, we're relying partly on accidents, but accidents that we've made more likely, like absorption in meditation, if you sort of mean to put it very crudely. We're making that more likely to arise by putting the conditions in place, like Amelie Oden was saying. But yeah, these paintings affected me immediately as I walked in. So I had a strong emotional experience as soon as I walked in. So I sat down and I just wanted to look for a long time. I'm not great one for looking at paintings. I make the effort, I kind of turn up, but I don't get into it that automatically. Give me a book to read any day. But anyway, some people have very immediate intuitive experience, don't they, of the surface textures of a painting and so on. I'm not normally like that. Anyway, looking at these Rothkos, the friend I was with simply told me that he committed suicide not long after painting them, and I had this huge release of something like grief. So sort of floods of tears and a kind of love. And for me, the key thing about that, I felt in touch with kind of everything, just briefly as a kind of thumbnail sketch, if you like. And you can't say later what it is. And as I say, I haven't been able to repeat it. But all it took was somebody to name the kind of, probably one of the most intense kinds of suffering a person can be in, where they actually decide to do that. In the presence of this person's, I think, very, very deep artistic creation. And it triggered a kind of outflow of emotion in me. The key thing about that, for me that day, is I wasn't thinking about myself at all. I had no thought of me or my life. Simply in these paintings and in this kind of, I'm not going to pretend it was his emotions or anything, but something had been communicated quite deeply. And the meeting of the beauty and the pain told me something that in that moment felt completely essential to life. And there was nothing further needed. You know those wonderful moments you sometimes have. There's nothing further needed to feel completely in touch with life and its flows and its ups and downs and its inevitable pain, and actually its inevitable ending, but this immense kind of, not just human spirit, but creative spirit of whatever kind it is. There's one story from my own life. And these things are only glimpses of what the Buddha saw, which is the nature of existence. Okay? So the reason it's so good to cherish these experiences that we can't say what exactly was going on, even if we can tell the story, which is never the same as the experience itself, is that we need to experience for ourselves something like what later can only be told to us through the language of concepts and images. And that is, in a sense, what the Dharma, the Buddha's teaching, is. It's an attempt to put into a vehicle that can reach us something of that experience, but much, much higher. So something where a truth like impermanence or a truth like suffering, I think both of which were in that experience of mine, plus a vision of beauty and what's actually possible, are somehow packaged into a thing that we can pick up in a bookshop or a shrine room, or I guess a YouTube talk, and access, so that we can eventually ascend to that same level of inspiration. Okay? So what the Buddhist tradition has come up with is two things, basically concepts and images, for trying to communicate that. Okay? But the image and the concept themselves are not the thing. The thing is, it probably departs from an experience like that. Like the ability to gaze at snowy mountain peaks for 3 hours undistracted. That's got a lovely quality of vision to it, because you're not in your normal state of mind if you're doing that. You're not distracted and, picking up your phone every 5 minutes again for no reason. So the Dharma is trying to say to us through concepts and images, that's even just the start. Your mind could grow from there and occupy a space like that all the time, and not just be knocked over by it. Because a lot of the time we're not actually ready for it, are we? I mean, like me in the Rothkos, you just kind of burst into tears and just kind of went on and on for a while. Like, it wasn't good for anything else for 5 or 6 minutes. We're not ready for it a lot of the time, so it just, comes in from the side and knocks us over. The Buddha would be able to perceive something like that, and in a sense, there's not even a tremor. There's a huge response of the heart, but there's no worry, there's no shock, there's no surprise. The mind's like that all the time, in that state where if you chose to, you could gaze at a landscape for 3 hours, completely untroubled, if there's nothing further to do at that moment. If there was some suffering in front of you to address, you go back into communication and start pointing out to somebody the fact that, for example, they are creating their own world and therefore their own suffering with this particular habit that they have. So find a way of doing that. So in Bhante's talk, he lists concepts and images, famous formulations of the teachings or ways it's been handed down to us. The concepts particularly, they sound quite formulaic by the time they kind of land. That's things like the Four Noble Truths, the 3 marks of conditioned existence, the 4 emptinesses, can be abstruse sort of stuff, or at least it's doctrinal, not to knock that. The Four Noble Truths, what they contain in them, is, in a short set of statements, the fact that we suffer, the reason that we suffer, the possibility of going completely beyond that, and the way towards it. So it's no small thing. I was probably being a bit dismissive there. Just calling them concepts is probably a bit rude. But I particularly want to talk about the images, because if we're to go from that vision, that gazing at the mountain peak, as he puts it, he also uses the image of mountain, gazing at the mountain peak, not just gazing at the peak, but climbing the slopes of the mountain up to the peak itself. If we want to actually tread that path, there's got to be imagination involved. And imagination's got the word image in it, hasn't it? So the Buddhist tradition, I think, figured out long ago, probably sometime shortly after the death of the Buddha, that images and imagination would be needed. So three of the most famous ones that you may have come across are the Wheel of Life, the Buddha, and the Path. Because the Wheel of Life there probably isn't time to describe it, and thank goodness there isn't time to do a drawing, because I'm not very good at that. And it's a complicated picture. Anyway, the wheel of life, it's basically the cycle of births and deaths going round and round, and happiness being followed by unhappiness, and at the very centre of the wheel, who's familiar with the wheel of life? You know that? Just quick, yeah, okay, about half the room maybe. At the very centre of the wheel of life, you've got the pictures of a cock, a pig and a snake. I thought I'd just say this before doing all the other concentric rings. They're all biting each other's tails. So the cock, the pig and the snake, which are ignorance, greed and hatred, are all chasing each other and all biting each other's tails. So you can see from that they're not going to get anywhere with it. That's going on and on through eternity, if you see what I mean. These three animals just chasing each other, greed, hatred and delusion. That's the wheel of life. That's the kind of cycle of action and reaction, pleasant being followed by unpleasant, going back to pleasant again, basing our hopes on that, trying to push away the unpleasant, gather the pleasant towards us, trying to kind of survive and get through life on that basis, which the Buddhist tradition, by showing us the wheel of life, is saying doesn't work. Okay, so that's a vision of the situation as it is now. You've got the path, which crucially is a spiral path. So the main thing about the wheel of life is basically it's a wheel. What do wheels do? They go round and round. The spiral path is so called because it ascends. So it's also round, but it climbs up. Okay? So even if it goes past familiar experiences again and again, and if you practice for a long time, you'll see that you stumble across your own unskillful habits again and again, I'm afraid. But each time you do, hopefully, you're a bit more aware. You're a bit more relaxed towards it. You've got more metta. You recover more quickly. You've got more of a sense of humour towards your own weaknesses, which helps you have more of a sense of humour towards other people's weaknesses, which is even more important. And you ascend the spiral path. Okay, so you've got the wheel, the spiral, and at the top of the spiral, you've got the Buddha. So that's, in a way, the main one to bear in mind. And that's why, of course, we've quite often got an image of a Buddha in a shrine room, like this one. So I thought we could just look at that for a moment. Biggest thing in the room and easy to stop noticing it. So that's a statue, of course, but I think it's a very beautiful one. It was built for the opening of this centre in 1978, and it's an idealised form. Of course, it's bigger than a person. It's golden. It's rather beautiful. You've got this erect, composed posture, and I would say he's gazing out at the world with complete stillness and a kind of loving concern, love and well-wishing that doesn't have any limit to it. So quite a lot more helpful sometimes than thinking through the fact that we suffer and why we suffer and we're stuck on the wheel of life, or, well, we're not stuck, but we're in it, trying not to be stuck. At least as important to that, a lot of the time, we'll be gazing at the Buddha. Meditation practices, of course, make this mean this is something you sort of take with you, gazing at a Buddha or Bodhisattva figure, and then getting into some sort of, well, receiving blessings from it. To feel that we, all of the rational stuff aside, all of which is good to do, we can actually just grow towards the Buddha. And the Buddha emanates light towards us. We can kind of bask in that and simply grow, a bit like a flower grows and opens out if it's got enough sunlight. So these are different ways of seeing the path. You've got vision, then you've got that work of transformation, which I'm just being brief about because my friends are going to do the other talks over the next 7 weeks. And in a way, what that's taking you back to is the vision. But vision so fully inhabited that you don't need a word like vision anymore. It's not a vision that arises and then lapses again. You know, those glimpses that we've all had, we lose them again. That experience where you intuit something about death, for example, or the world as it is. Luckily we remember it, but it's very hard to re-inhabit it. So you've got to hope, in a way, you just lay the conditions to make it more likely. It's taking us back to that vision. So the Buddha is golden and beautiful for reasons, if you see what I mean. It's like a kind of completeness. To go back to the language of these talks, perfect vision, Bhante says he's called it perfect rather than right, because samyak, the word translated, means something like thorough, integral, or complete, or perfect. So you can see how thin something like right might sound after that. It's actually saying complete vision. And that's what the Buddha has. So I hope that kind of makes sense as a framework. You've got glimpses of that vision. A lot of the time spiritual life is a lot of drudgery, actually. A lot of just, I'm afraid, taking the right steps, continuing to pursue things you know are a good idea, turning up to your meditation, turning up to your friends, taking a risk with how you do it, but also just trying to make good decisions about your livelihood, your speech, your action, and so on, as a way to reascend back up into that state and inhabit it more completely. So that's one way of seeing it. Luckily, like I say, there's us climbing up towards that mountain peak. There's also, to switch the metaphor, the light of the Buddha, or the sun of the Buddha, shining its warmth and light on us and just causing us to open out and grow and naturally unfold. Doesn't mean we don't have to do anything. We do still have to do all those things, but instead of seeing it like we've got to build up and kind of get somewhere, you can also see that the effort of practice is actually just a removal of blockages, a removal of those unskillful habits we were talking about, to uncover what the tradition also calls our true inheritance, which is the enlightened mind. So the tradition also calls it our birthright. It's very, very strong Buddhism on the fact that you can get enlightened. That language gets problematic later, but we don't need to worry about that now. A human being can get enlightened, even in this life. So it calls it our birthright, saying you can come into that inheritance. There's lots we've got to do, there's lots we've got to uncover, but it's there, actually. It's not in us right now, but it's in us in potential. So to come finally back to that dream, I promised I would. What the dream made me think about was a story from the White Lotus Sutra called The Jewel in the Garment. Very simple story. Two friends, they get drunk one night, or one of them does. And his friend, out of compassion, because he knows that the other guy is going to stumble through the next few bits of his life, I think, sews a very, very valuable jewel into his garment. Okay. They part, and he thinks, I assume he thinks he'll find it the next day and he'll have enough money, on his hangover or whatever, he'll be able to get from A to B or find somewhere to stay. He sews a jewel right into his garment. Actually, what the guy who was drunk endures is years of poverty and hardship and trying to get back to a decent life. They encounter each other after all these years. The man is dishevelled, he's poor, he's gone through all this hardship. And his friend says to him, "What a shame. Let me show you something." And opens out this extremely valuable jewel in his garment. He said, "I sewed it in there all that time ago. It was there all along." And that's a metaphor for the fact that if only we knew it, this potential is in us. And that's at least what the dream made me think of when I encountered all of this beautiful golden sort of currency. But it wasn't like I was excited about spending the money. I just thought, all this wealth, I've found it among my things. What a lovely moment. But also what I found among the stamps, instead of one of the stamps, was a watch face, also golden, with ticking hands. So I thought, okay, here is the natural dharmic inheritance. At least on some level, my mind knows that this is going somewhere, and that somewhere there's gold to be found, and we can find it. It's lucky because, like I say, it involves a lot of just continuing to take the steps over the years. But somewhere there's gold. It's somewhere in me in a way. I'm trying to uncover it. And there might not be a lot of time. So I don't know why the watch was in the dream. They contain random stuff sometimes, don't they? But that's what I made of it anyway. Here's all this wealth that you can just inherit, and there might not be that much time. So that's why it's worth pursuing these steps, but all of them with reference to those uttermost values that I hope you feel you've all had a glimpse of, or at least a glimpse of a glimpse, and been able to touch and value and cherish and stay in touch with during your practice, because built out of that are this greater vision, or starting from it. So they're really to be remembered, brought to mind, dwelt on, reflected on, and so on. But if in any doubt, what we can always do is kind of gaze up again at the Buddha and revere the Buddha, because if we're doing that, we're in connection with the ideal. So it's not just a block of plaster and paint, not just an idea or a concept. If we're emotionally involved with that and gazing at the Buddha, we're in connection with the ideal and in some way either moving towards it or allowing it to move towards us, which in the end are the same thing, a matter of uncovering this true potential that's in all of us. Okay, so I want to leave it there as for talking, but speaking of revering the Buddha, I wanted to close on a mantra. So if you haven't done that before, all it involves is chanting the name of the Buddha. So that's a way of revering this ideal and just leaving aside all of that stuff I've said, all of the ideas, and just calling out the name of the Buddha, the great sage that made this breakthrough and handed all of this, showed us this potential. So we'll do some chanting of the Buddha's name, Shakyamuni. Let that fade. When it's faded, we'll just let it go into silence. I'll ring a bell, and that'll be the end of the class. I think D is D still here? There you are. D's going to start the mantra. Thank you. Okay, so we'll just sit quietly for a moment, and then when D's ready.
Shakyamuni Swaha.